Teddy Roosevelt 2019 is not monetized. If you like this content, please like, subscribe, and share so more viewers will see this information. Thank you.
They can't afford free college, but guess what they just did? The Senate's military spending increase alone is enough to make a public college free.
The battle started when Clinton said this about Gabbard during a podcast.
I'm not making any predictions, but I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary and are grooming her to be the third-party candidate. She's the favorite of the Russians.
Good. 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 Good.
Aloha. Why? Why are you doing it?
You know, after 9/11, like so many Americans, I wanted to do something to serve and protect our people and our country. So I enlisted in the Army National Guard, volunteered to deploy to Iraq, and in 2012, along with now Senator Tammy Duckworth, became one of the first female combat veterans ever elected to Congress. It is those values of service before self that every soldier, every service member represents that I want to bring to the White House, to reinstill those values of honor, integrity, and respect to the presidency.
Now, how did your experience fighting in Iraq shape your outlook of the United States' role in foreign policy? Because in my research, I found that you have a strict non-interventionist approach, and you are against the United States entering countries and being there for this sort of regime change.
Yeah.
Devastating.
When you say move towards reconciliation and peace, how so?
Well, you see there's differences, right? There's the people who are with the current government in Venezuela, and there is the opposition. Clearly, they have differences on what kind of future, what kind of governance, and who should lead that government going forward, rather than threatening to use the United States coming in and trying to act once again as the world's police, which, by the way, throughout history has not had good results, not for the people in those countries, what to speak of the cost that we, the American people, pay.
Is there an argument, and I really don't know the answer to this, but is there an argument that these regime change wars, although terrible, we would be way worse off if those weren't in place?
I think that's an argument that proponents for regime change wars try to make, but history shows and proves that the very opposite is true.
Here's just a segment of stuff that will never appear on American television.
يضربوا المدنيين يعني؟
مدنيين كله هذا بيت عمنا كله مدنيين كله عسكريين كله مدنيين يضربون من الله ينتقم منا.
So there are 100,000 stories like that simply do not get into our consciousness, and so we remain kind of immune from having to deal with the consequences of our collective behavior.
Look at Iraq. You can look at Libya. You can look at Syria. You can look at Guatemala and Ecuador. You can look at other countries, Iran, where in the past we have either overtly or covertly through the CIA gone in and toppled leaders of countries or dictators or regimes. And the result has been more suffering for the people in those countries. Their lives have been made worse off, not only in the short term, but in the long term.
So, I mean, that is the land of unconfirmed.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Gabbard didn't hold back in slamming Clinton, calling her the queen of warmongers, embodiment of corruption, and personification of the rot that has sickened the Democratic Party for so long.
And so I'd like to ask you, would you be willing to stand with my generation and end the student debt crisis by supporting free college for all?
He did ask you yes or no. Would you support free college for all?
I am not for free four-year college for all. No. Thank you.
So let me ask you this, because
and I wish if I was a magic genie and could give that to everyone and we could afford it, I would.
Bernie Sanders was, when he wanted to have Medicare for all and free college, and Hillary Clinton referred to those things as ponies. Everybody wants a pony. But, you know, remember how they said, you know, Bernie's a fairy duster, pie in the sky. How are you going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for free college? Free college for the whole country? We can't afford that. We can't afford. How are you going to pay for that? So they can't afford free college, but guess what they just did? The Senate's military spending increase alone is enough to make a public college free. Trump wanted to spend an extra $55 billion. But guess what? Congress went ahead and they said, that's not enough, Trumpy. So they decided to spend $700 billion more dollars like that. $700 billion more dollars. Now, how much would it cost for free college? It would cost roughly, some people say $45 billion, some people say $65 billion. So let's say 65, take the high number. $65 billion. They could have had that like that. We could all have free college right now because
Nothing to see here, please.
And there's fear there because they see their whole world being disrupted by people like me or others who are coming in and saying, no, we're not buying into any of that. And we're coming in to actually fulfill the mission that we've been charged with by those who voted for us to serve the people, all the people of this country.
So you know this, right? You know that she's this. She's part of the resistance. My public position is I'm with the resistance. My private position is I'm with Wall Street.
I resist you.
Yeah. That's the whole thing, like the weird thing, like she's part, the John Podesta, Tim Kaine, they're all part of what we have to resist. They're not the part of the resistance, right? So here, so get this. So Tulsi Gabbard came out the other day and she said, she said, when I was first elected to Congress, I promised that money wouldn't influence my decisions. I rejected money from Wall Street, Big Pharma, and others. Citizens United worsened the crisis of dark money influencing our country. We need to get corporate money and lobbyists out of politics. And then she made a real big announcement, and she said this. She goes, I've decided to stop accepting PAC lobbyist money. Bottom line, we can't allow our future to be driven and shaped by special interests.
Howard Dean wants her out of Congress.
Well, so I retweeted, and the corporate Democrat smears begin in 3, 2, 1. And I tagged Neera Tanden and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And lo and behold, like clockwork, well, I do think Assad using chemical weapons to murder children is worse than lobbyists, so maybe that differentiates me from you, Tulsi. First of all, Tulsi Gabbard is a veteran.
Yeah, does Neera Tanden have any friends that didn't come back from Iraq because they died in regime change war?
No.
I'm just curious, no?
And would you say that, well, this is my position. I think that Trump plays a part of that because I think he was the first guy to come in basically self-funded or being funded through his own means and not listening to the rest of the Republican Party saying, hey, I'm going to take over and I'm going to do this my way. And then knowing that he could do that and knowing that there were so many Republicans against him and knowing that there's so many Democrats against him as well, but yet he's still the president.
Yep.
Like people are like, Jesus, this is a fragile system. Like this system it's what they've done to acquire power is still very vulnerable, even though they have this deeply entrenched system of weird little relationships that it's not good enough.
Yeah.
That if the people do rise up and they decide, hey, we want to put Tulsi in as president, you're going to have a different situation. A lot of you clowns are going to be out of work.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's really that's the message that we're carrying to living rooms and town halls and communities across the country is Washington continues to underestimate the power of the people.
If you become president, when you become president.
There you go.
Sorry. And you do get to change the way we spend money and stop spending money on these regime change wars, what would be the first thing you invested in this country? And how would you go about doing that?
That's a good question. I think there's I'd want to give that some thought because there are a whole host of challenges that we're facing. You know, I mean, healthcare is among the top of the list. And, you know, we've talked a little bit about that the last time I was here. Our crumbling infrastructure continues to be something that's not only just uncomfortable every time we're driving over potholes, it's actually threatening people's lives.
There's always been a call to help countries in need in the world.
Yeah.
There's always been a call for the United States to step in and, you know, and do something. But yet there's problems in this country that never change. There's bad communities in this country that are impoverished and crime-ridden that have been the same way for decades. There was a former Baltimore police officer named Michael Wood who came on my podcast, and he was talking to me about the time when he was in the Baltimore Police Department. They found a piece of paper that was documenting various crimes from the 1970s, for one of the years from 1970-something, and it was the same exact crime in the same exact area that they were having problems with now, whether it's homicide, narcotics, whatever it was. They were having the exact same issue in the exact same places. And then he realized, like, well, there's no effort put to change this.
Yeah.
If you're talking about decades and decades and decades, why wasn't there money funneled into this community? Why isn't there some community centers that help children? Why isn't there an emphasis on better education? Why isn't there more police officers or at least some sort of civilian presence that helps out people and stops some of this crime and gives people a better place to live and then fix a lot of this, what you're seeing decade after decade.
Yeah.
If we want to make America better, the best way to do that is to fix the weakest parts. The weakest parts are the people that are born in a shit situation. They don't get a good break.
Yeah.
They got a bad break. They're born in a crime-ridden environment, and then they have to figure out how to be a better person while dealing with all this.
Yeah.
And then you've got people that are aloof to this, that are like, hey, figure it out for yourself. I did.
Yeah.
Like as if we all start from the same spot in this crazy game called life, because we don't.
No.
Those people are in the worst spot. Why can't we fix the worst spot?
Yeah.
It seems like we could.
Yeah.
If we can help Iraq, if we can invade Syria, if we can do some of the things that people either want us to do or we have done, why can't we do that?
Exactly. And that's what I often remind people is that right now, today, we spend $4 billion every month in Afghanistan. $4 billion.
Every month.
Every single month. Imagine what could be done with those dollars and those resources in communities like Baltimore, in communities like Flint, Michigan, where people are still being poisoned by their water.
So those concerns about paying for all that stuff, those concerns were brushed aside Monday night as the Senate overwhelmingly approved an $80 billion annual increase, which turns out to be a $700 billion increase.
This defense bill went through the Senate several times starting in September of 2017. Every time Senator Amy Klobuchar voted to increase defense spending. The final bill passed in June of 2018, and it was a $716 billion defense bill, roughly a $70 to $80 billion increase over the previous year's spending on defense. President Donald Trump asked for a $55 billion increase, but Democrats and Republicans agreed that we should spend $70 to $80 billion more on defense. When they say we can't afford things like free college, keep in mind, free college for every student going to a public university or college in the country would cost between $45 and $65 billion per year.
In addition to this, the US has a military presence in 110 countries around the world. A year after his election, Barack Obama approved the new administration's first military budget. This amounts to $680 billion, $30 billion more than Bush's last defense budget.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard is responding to Hillary Clinton's comments suggesting that a 2020 candidate is being groomed by the Russians. Congresswoman Gabbard joins me now from Iowa City, Iowa. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being here with us. So, in
Aloha,
full,
thank you.
What did you make of Secretary Clinton's comments this week?
Let's be clear about what this is about. Really, that if anyone stands up and speaks out to end the regime change war policies our country has had for so long, the likes of which we've seen waged in Iraq, Libya, and ongoing in Syria, we will be labeled as foreign agents. We will be labeled as traitors to our country.